Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Forensic Science in my basement. We are going to move on in our content into the next unit, which is forensic toxicology. Once we figure out a way to take tests and things like that, we will revisit our physical properties unit. Um, Make sure you get your objectives submitted to me. I've gotten most of them from you, but please get those objectives submitted to me for credit. That is your current assignment that you should be working on. I am now getting you guys set up for your next assignment. Um, Once we get the test thing figured out, we'll take tests on all this stuff as well. Once we get back, hopefully we'll get to do a whole bunch of labs. I have labs related to the physical properties unit that we haven't done yet on hair and fibers and fabrics, things like that, as well as some other labs related to some future units we're going to be covering. So, fingers crossed, we will get to come back to school and just do a whole bunch of labs that will refresh all of this content that we've been learning. So, today we're going to talk about forensic toxicology. You can see the word toxic right in there, so of course it must deal with some type of chemicals or toxins that may have legal implications. Of course, when we think about this, we're probably thinking most about illegal drugs and illegal drug use. And yes, that is a major component of what they do. The forensic toxicologist has 4 main tasks that we look at. The first one is post-mortem drug testing. That's one of those new terms that we learned. Post-mortem means after death, right? Were the drugs the cause or contributor to the death? Was this accidental? Was this an overdose that was intentional? Sometimes people have been poisoned, not so much in our country, but if you've read literature, that was the common way to kill people. And as well, where there are less guns in Europe, they poison people as well. So that's another one where they will test a body post-mortem to see where the drugs may have played a role, right? The whole reconstruction of the crime scene, knowing the quantity, the quality, all kinds of things like that can tell you some information about how big of a component the drugs were to a person's death. Next one here is workplace drug testing, right, for safety and performance, especially if you're going to have a CDL license or operating any kind of machinery. They want to make sure that you are mentally sound and working at your best and your best alertness. And so it is very common for these types of jobs to have drug testing. And so if an accident takes place and it goes to court, they of course will call in a forensic toxicologist to sample the suspect in question to see if drugs were a role in an accident in the workplace. Evaluation of contraband. When a substance is found on a person, it goes back to the lab and the forensic toxicologist will analyze it. They can also do this in the field just for a quick test. Most police officers have field test kits for basic types of drugs, and so they can, arrest on site. But as far as further testing, they go back to the lab, and that's where the forensic toxicologist comes in. And of course, one of the things I've talked about before is they like to look to see at the purity of the substance so they can see where they are in the hierarchy of the drug chain, I should say. Where at the top there is the most purest substance, so those guys are the kingpins, the big dealers, where the least pure drugs are usually found lower down at the bottom level dealers, and so they know who to question and what to be asking if they know what kind of drugs they've found on a person. So that's also a valuable piece of information. The last one is not so commonly thought of, but it is something that's going to be coming up a lot more often in the future, hopefully, and that is environmental testing. There are companies and governmental agencies and all kinds of just, people, farmers, everybody does it, right? Where we are putting chemicals into the environment. And we're finding that chemicals in the environment, such as heavy metals, can cause cancer. And so we would like to limit the amount of chemicals that are going into the ground, into the water, into the air. And so there's going to be hopefully a lot of more court cases involving chemical testing of these substances, air and soil quality and water quality. And some companies or governmental agencies, or just, that guy down the road from you who dumps his tractor oil in the back field, that's also bad. So these are all the things that the forensic toxicologist would be looking into as well in taking care of this environment that we have. It's the only planet we can live on. So where do we get these samples from? Well, most of the time we go to good old urine. We have urine testing. If there is a sudden death overdose, we can go right into their gastric contents, right? Their stomach, and see what was in there. Sometimes bile and liver. If we're talking about tests for the workplace, we will look at hair, and blood might be donated for certain employments. Excuse me. The vitreous humor, yes, is eye fluid. There are many humors of the body, fluids of the body, and the vitreous humor is the fluid that keeps your eyeball inflated. This, of course, is done post-mortem, where they can get a very good amount of blood out of your eye and sample it very easily. Gross, but true. So another thing to remember is that the insects found on and around the body can also be helpful. We just talked about this in forensic entomology, where if the insects are consuming human tissue and the tissue contains toxins, those insects may also contain the toxins as well. So another thing that can be tested or collected in this case. All right, I'll zip through this real quick because you guys have probably gotten this lecture through health class. But we have different types of drugs out there. There are different types of purposes people like to get high for. Usually it's just to make up for some kind of chemical imbalance or mental, psychological. There are so many variables involved. We don't have time to unwrap that category. So we'll just look at it in terms of the reconstruction, right? If a suspect or a victim was on a substance and understanding what that substance does to the person, it can help us to understand maybe what kind of mood or behavior they were in, right? For example, narcotics are just what we refer to as pain-killing drugs. The opiates and the opiate problem that we are hopefully making it through to the other side of became a big problem with the overprescription of things like Xanax, Oxycontin, things like that, Percocets. And so people became very physically dependent, where they would get very sick from withdrawal sicknesses and things like that. And so it caused a big problem. So why does that relate to the legal system? Well, some of these people are dying, either suicidal, they are accidentally overdosing because the samples that they're getting, but also they may be robbing and stealing from people to get the money to afford these jobs, because this is obviously a substance that makes you very tired, and you're probably a really poor worker, so you're going to have to find the funds one way or another. Depressants, these are the ones that slow down the central nervous system. And so I know it's weird to think, but alcohol does fall under depressants, even though you've probably seen movies or hopefully not too much in real life. The angry drunk, but it is technically a depressant that slows down your nervous system. And so when we find things like Quaaludes and Valium and things like that in people's systems, it can tell us other things, that they must have been slow, maybe poor reaction times, things like that would be possible in that case. Stimulants are the opposite, right? They speed up the central nervous system. This can make people more hyper and jumpy and less predictable, also more prone to fighting. So this would help with that. Don't forget, caffeine is a stimulant. Okay, it is a very strong stimulant. It is one of the most abused drugs in our country. I know you don't think of caffeine as a drug because we just can go buy it everywhere, but it does amp you up, as we've all known when we got that double shot. Hallucinogens. Here's another one that just changes your perception. Hallucinogens will possibly give you actual hallucinations. Most of it is they just change your mood, your perception, your attitude. And so people who commit crimes that are maybe found with these things on them were seeing things, were, thought they were an animal or some kind of werewolf, who knows. So this is how we can look at hallucinogens if we find them in the victim or the suspect. Same thing with club drugs. Club drugs may make you hallucinate. They may make you more affectionate. They may make you just go crazy. We don't have receptors in our brain to receive these types of drugs, and so they just mash their way into their brains and they cause a lot of damage. Synthetic drugs are on the scene, pun intended, unfortunately, because they really do a lot of damage to the brain as well, of course, as you see with the methamphetamine problem. So, last slide here. There are different types of dependence. Yes, you can have both, but we like to look at the types of dependence and how they affect the body, which also will help determine why people act the way they do. They have a dependence on this because of an emotional need, right? Some people just like, oh God, I gotta relax. I just need a cigarette, I just need to have a beer. I gotta just calm down, right? Or sometimes it's like, oh, I'm not going to get through the day unless I blow a couple lines of cocaine. You have this, you think that way. You're like, you're just not going to make it through the day without these specific drugs, whether it's caffeine or cocaine or nicotine, things like that. You think that you need it to make it through the day. You have this emotional tie to it. There is also physical dependence. Physical and psychological can overlap. The physical dependence is when your body starts to really rely on it, where if you continue to use a certain type of drug, then you will suffer from withdrawal sickness. Anybody who has had a few too many days in a row of that delicious coffee mania knows that when you take a day off, you get a headache, and you're like, why does my brain hurt so much? Well, the answer is because you're having a caffeine withdrawal headache. And that is just one example. Much easier to kick than things like heroin. So there is a physical dependence component because your body actually starts using the drug as a supplement for something that your body may be naturally making on its own, and so it struggles to rectify this missing drug, causing withdrawal sickness. So that is what physical dependence is. And as you can see, we're on our last slide. So I will pass along a set of objectives to you right after this slideshow airs, and share this with you as well if you just like to check it out the old-fashioned way. Okay, and Draco signing off from Biology in the Basement, Forensics Science Edition.